The fluorescent lights hummed their familiar tune as Maria Gonzalez moved through the 42nd floor of TechGlobal Corporation, her cleaning cart squeaking softly against the polished marble. At 45, she had perfected the art of invisibility, the way housekeeping staff learn to blend into corporate landscapes like shadows. Tonight felt different, though. The tension in the building had been palpable all week, with hushed conversations about system failures and mounting losses that could reach $500 million. She had overheard fragments of worried phone calls, seen the stress lines deepening on executives' faces, felt the electricity of crisis crackling through the air-conditioning vents. She paused outside the main conference room, where a complex algorithmic formula sprawled across the whiteboard in Marcus Sterling's distinctive handwriting. The numbers called to her like a siren song, demanding attention she couldn't ignore. Maria's eyes scanned the equations, and within seconds, something twisted in her stomach. That familiar, nauseating recognition of error that had haunted her since childhood. The formula was wrong. Catastrophically wrong. She could see exactly where the logic failed, where the recursive loops would create infinite cascades of error, where the system would inevitably collapse under the weight of its own mathematical contradictions. Her father's voice echoed from decades past. "Every wrong number is a failure, Maria, a disgrace to our family, a mark of stupidity that brands you forever." The phantom sound of his belt against her small hands made her flinch even now. Professor Eduardo Gonzalez had been a brilliant mathematician and a cruel father whose pursuit of perfection had left scars deeper than any physical wound. She couldn't breathe properly when she saw mistakes like this. The compulsion rose from somewhere deep and primal, the same psychological force that had driven her to correct mathematical errors obsessively since she was 7 years old. Before she could stop herself, Maria was at the board, erasing Marcus's calculations and replacing them with the correct sequence. Her hand moved with practiced precision, muscle memory from years at MIT when mathematics had been her sanctuary instead of her curse. The relief that washed over her was immediate and profound, like finally scratching an itch that had been tormenting her for hours. For just a moment, she felt like Dr. Maria Isabel Gonzalez Rivera again, the woman who had once believed she could change the world with elegant equations and breakthrough algorithms. Then footsteps echoed in the hallway, and reality crashed back. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Marcus Sterling's voice cut through the silence like a blade. The chief financial officer stood in the doorway, his patrician features twisted with indignation. At 45, Marcus embodied everything Maria had learned to fear about corporate America: the casual cruelty of inherited privilege, the weaponization of educational pedigree, the assumption that worth could be measured by zip codes and alma maters. His Hermes tie was perfectly knotted, his Italian leather shoes gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. Everything about him screamed old money and older prejudices. "I'm sorry," Maria stammered, still holding the marker. The words came out in the heavily accented English that always emerged when she was nervous, the voice of a woman who had learned this language as a teenager rather than in elite prep schools. "I just saw that the calculation was—" "You just saw what?" Marcus's voice rose to a near shout, his face flushing red with what seemed like genuine outrage. "You think because you can hold a cleaning rag, you understand advanced algorithmic theory? You think your people have any business touching proprietary company information?" The words hit Maria like physical blows. "Your people." She had heard variations of this poison her entire professional life, but it never stopped cutting deep. The casual dehumanization, the reduction of her existence to racial categories and class assumptions, the automatic dismissal of any possibility that she might possess intelligence or insight. "Please, I didn't mean any harm. I was just what? Playing at being smart?" Marcus's laugh was ugly, the sound of someone who had never had his intelligence questioned, never had to prove his worth beyond the circumstances of his birth. "Do you have any idea what those formulas represent? Do you comprehend the millions of dollars in research and development that went into creating those algorithms?" Maria wanted to explain that she understood exactly what the formulas represented, that she had written similar equations herself, that the corrections she had made would save the company hundreds of millions of dollars. But she had learned long ago that explanations only made things worse. "Security! Get this woman out of here immediately, and make sure she never sets foot on this floor again." Marcus pulled out his phone with theatrical urgency. "I want a full investigation into how long she's had access to sensitive materials. This could be industrial espionage." As the security guards approached, Maria's cleaning supplies scattered across the expensive carpet like the remnants of a life that kept falling apart. One item tumbled from her pocket, a small USB drive with MIT Advanced Computing MG etched into its surface. Marcus didn't notice it as they escorted her away, too busy congratulating himself on maintaining corporate security and protecting the company from threats he was certain existed in every shadow. The USB drive skittered under a desk, carrying with it the last physical evidence of who Maria had once been. But the next morning, when CEO Chad Wellington arrived early to review the quarterly projections, he stopped dead in his tracks at the conference room whiteboard. Where Marcus's calculations had been, elegant corrections now flowed in handwriting that spoke of advanced mathematical training. The modifications weren't just accurate, they were brilliant, solving problems that had stumped their entire engineering team for months. Chad had studied engineering at Stanford before transitioning to business, and he recognized mathematical sophistication when he saw it. Chad ran the corrected algorithm through their testing environment, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he input the mysterious corrections. The error rate dropped from a catastrophic 23.7% to less than 3%. The system optimization was flawless, the kind of breakthrough that could save the company hundreds of millions of dollars. "Who could have written this?" he murmured to himself, studying the sophisticated notation that only someone with doctorate-level expertise could have produced. The handwriting was feminine, precise, and completely unfamiliar. Maria Gonzalez had been invisible for 3 years, moving through TechGlobal's offices like a ghost. Born in Guadalajara to a mathematics professor father whose pursuit of perfection had bordered on abuse, she had learned early that excellence was never enough. Every small mistake had earned her father's leather belt, and hours of isolation, with textbooks, drilling equations until her fingers bled from writing. "Mathematics is not forgiving, Maria," he would say, standing over her small desk while she worked through problem sets that would challenge graduate students. One wrong number can bring down buildings, crash airplanes, kill thousands of people. The pattern had shaped her entire life. Full scholarship to MIT, doctorate in applied mathematics with a specialty in AI optimization, 15 patents in algorithmic design, and then Roberto. Her husband had been brilliant too, a mathematician whose gentle nature had helped heal some of her childhood wounds. They had dreamed of changing the world together, one elegant equation at a time. Roberto had understood her compulsions, her midnight panic attacks when she encountered mathematical errors, her need to fix problems that others couldn't even see. "Your mind sees patterns that the rest of us miss," he would tell her. "That's a gift, not a curse." Roberto died because of a mathematical error. Not his own. He had identified the flaw in the autonomous vehicle guidance system and reported it to his supervisors with characteristic thoroughness. But the cost-benefit analysis showed that fixing the bug would delay the product launch by 6 months, potentially costing millions in lost market share. The executives, led by a financial consultant named Marcus Sterling, decided the risk was acceptable. The probability of failure was low, they argued, and the company couldn't afford to fall behind competitors who were rushing similar products to market. The crash happened 3 weeks later. Roberto's test vehicle, following the flawed algorithm, miscalculated a turn at 60 miles per hour and slammed into a concrete barrier. The lawsuit that followed branded Maria a troublemaker, a grieving widow whose accusations threatened the entire autonomous vehicle industry. Marcus Sterling himself had testified that Roberto's concerns were mathematically unfounded and driven by perfectionist tendencies rather than practical engineering considerations. The blacklist was swift and comprehensive. Dr. Maria Isabel Gonzalez Rivera ceased to exist in the world of technology. Only Maria the janitor remained. Now, 3 years later, she lived in a cramped apartment in East San Jose with her 12-year-old daughter Sophia. 80% of her janitor's salary went to support her aging mother in Mexico, who suffered from diabetes and needed expensive medications. The remaining 20% barely covered rent and Sophia's school supplies. But every night, when she cleaned TechGlobal's offices, the numbers called to her. She couldn't help herself. When she saw errors in the formulas left on whiteboards, the compulsion overwhelmed her rational mind. Her father's voice would start whispering, "Wrong numbers kill people, Maria. Wrong numbers killed Roberto." Sophia often asked why her mother jerked awake in the middle of the night, why she paced the apartment muttering about calculation errors that existed only in textbooks. "Mommy, why do you get so scared when I make mistakes in my homework?" Sophia would ask, her young face creased with worry. Maria couldn't explain that her mind was trapped in a prison of mathematical perfection, that every number had to be right or someone might die. "Because mistakes have consequences, mija," she would say, pulling her daughter close. "And sometimes those consequences are bigger than we can imagine." David Chen was the only employee at TechGlobal who treated Maria like a human being. The 35-year-old software engineer made a point of greeting her each evening, asking about Sophia's grades and listening when she talked about her daughter's dreams of becoming an engineer. David had immigrated from Taiwan as a child and understood something about being underestimated, about having your intelligence questioned because of accent or appearance. He had noticed Maria's unusual behavior around whiteboards, the way she would stop and stare at equations with an intensity that seemed out of place for a cleaning woman. "You know a lot about math for someone in housekeeping," he had observed one evening, watching as Maria's eyes tracked across a complex formula with obvious comprehension. Her response had been carefully neutral. "I help my daughter with homework sometimes. She's very smart, wants to study engineering like her father did." But David wasn't fooled. He had seen the way Maria's eyes moved across complex formulas, the micro-expressions that suggested deep understanding rather than casual observation. The way she unconsciously corrected errors in her head, her fingers sometimes twitching as if she wanted to reach for a marker. 2 weeks after the mysterious whiteboard corrections, TechGlobal faced its worst crisis in company history. A critical system failure threatened to cost the company $500 million, and their most advanced AI algorithms were producing error rates that made the technology virtually useless. Stock prices had plummeted 20% in 3 days, and major clients were threatening to terminate contracts. Marcus Sterling, responsible for the financial models underlying the entire system, found himself completely unable to provide solutions. The mathematical complexities were beyond his capabilities, but admitting that would destroy his career. Rather than admit his limitations, Marcus decided to redirect blame toward the one person he had caught violating corporate security protocols. He spent hours crafting a narrative that would transform his ignorance into heroic vigilance, his failure into someone else's malicious intent. If I can prove that our problems are caused by sabotage rather than incompetence, he reasoned, then I'm the hero who identified the threat, not the executive who couldn't solve the problem. The emergency board meeting convened at 9 a.m. sharp, with Marcus leading the presentation. The conference room was packed with senior executives, board members, and legal counsel, all desperate for explanations about why their company was hemorrhaging money and losing competitive advantage. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a security breach that threatens the very foundation of our company, Marcus announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being believed without question. He had rehearsed this moment, practiced projecting confidence even as his own understanding of the technical problems remained virtually non-existent. 2 weeks ago, I personally witnessed Maria Gonzalez, a member of our janitorial staff, illegally accessing and modifying classified algorithmic data on our 42nd floor conference room. Marcus clicked through a prepared presentation, each slide designed to build a case for industrial espionage. The photographs showed before and after images of whiteboards, highlighting the changes in mathematical formulas without any context about their accuracy or impact. This woman, with no technical background or security clearance, deliberately altered critical calculations that control our AI systems. The board members leaned forward, their expressions shifting from confusion to alarm. Corporate espionage was a threat they understood, a problem that could be solved with security measures and legal action. It was far more comforting than the possibility that their technical leadership was simply inadequate. I believe we are dealing with a sophisticated operation, possibly foreign industrial espionage using low-level employees as vectors for system infiltration. Marcus continued, warming to his theme. The modifications were too precise, too targeted to be random vandalism. Someone trained this woman in our specific systems. CEO Chad Wellington listened carefully, remembering the mathematical elegance of those whiteboard corrections. Something about Marcus's narrative didn't align with the technical sophistication he had witnessed. The corrections hadn't been destructive, they had been brilliant, solving problems that their entire engineering team had been struggling with for months. Marcus, Chad interrupted, his voice carrying a note of skepticism. The modifications you're describing, our preliminary analysis showed they actually improved system performance significantly. Error rates dropped by over 20%. Marcus's composure flickered for just a moment before he regrouped, his politician's instincts kicking in. That's exactly the point, Chad. This wasn't random vandalism or simple sabotage. This was a precisely planned operation to create artificial problems and then provide solutions, establishing a pattern of system dependency. Classic social engineering. He clicked to the next slide, which showed a flowchart of theoretical espionage techniques. They create the crisis, then position themselves as indispensable by solving it. Meanwhile, They're gathering intelligence on our most sensitive algorithms. The board members murmured among themselves, the conspiracy theory gaining traction despite its logical inconsistencies. The scenario Marcus painted was sophisticated enough to be plausible, and the financial implications were staggering. If TechGlobal had been compromised at this level, their competitive advantage could be completely destroyed. We're talking about potential theft of intellectual property worth billions of dollars, Marcus emphasized. Every algorithm, every optimization, every breakthrough we've achieved could be in the hands of competitors or foreign governments. I recommend immediate termination and criminal prosecution, Marcus continued, his voice rising with manufactured outrage. We need to send a clear message that corporate espionage will not be tolerated. We need to demonstrate to our shareholders, our clients, and our competitors that TechGlobal takes security seriously. The legal implications were serious enough to make even the most skeptical board members reconsider their doubts. Criminal prosecution would generate publicity, demonstrate corporate vigilance, and deflect attention from any internal failures. David Chen, attending the meeting as a technical consultant, raised his hand tentatively. His engineering background made him suspicious of Marcus's claims, but challenging a senior executive in front of the board was career suicide. With respect, Marcus, I've worked with Maria for 3 years. She's never shown any signs of technical knowledge beyond helping her daughter with homework, and the improvements to the system were genuinely beneficial. Mr. Chen. Marcus cut him off sharply, his tone suggesting that David's career hung in the balance. Are you seriously suggesting we ignore a clear security violation because you've developed personal feelings for the perpetrator? The implied threat was clear. Question Marcus's narrative and find yourself associated with the alleged conspiracy. That kind of emotional thinking is exactly how sophisticated operations succeed. Marcus continued. They target sympathetic employees, build personal relationships, create internal advocates who will defend them even when evidence suggests criminal activity. David fell silent, but Chad noticed the young engineer's frustrated expression and filed it away for future consideration. Over the following weeks, Marcus systematically dismantled any potential support for Maria. He issued formal memoranda restricting her access to all areas containing sensitive information, citing ongoing security investigations and potential criminal activity. She was relegated to cleaning bathrooms and basement storage areas, effectively isolated from any possibility of accessing technical data. The other custodial staff began treating her with suspicion, wondering what she had done to deserve such dramatic restrictions. Meanwhile, Marcus used his position to pressure other employees who might support Maria. Janet Williams, the African-American head of accounting, found herself under increased scrutiny after suggesting the company investigate the situation more thoroughly. Janet, I hope you understand the seriousness of what we're dealing with, Marcus told her during a private meeting. Questioning our security protocols at this point could be misinterpreted as obstructing an ongoing investigation. The message was unmistakable. Support Maria, and your own loyalty would be questioned. Rosa Martinez, the head of the cleaning staff, was forced to file daily reports on Maria's activities or risk losing her job and the company subsidized housing that sheltered her extended family. I don't like doing this, Rosa confided to Maria during one of their brief encounters. But they say if I don't cooperate, they'll terminate my contract and my whole family will have to move. I have 6 grandchildren, Maria. I can't lose this job. Maria understood the impossible position Rosa faced and didn't blame her for the surveillance. This is about corporate security, Marcus explained to Chad during one of their private meetings, his tone suggesting that the CEO's leadership was being tested. If we appear weak on espionage, our stock price will crater even further. The board is already nervous about our Q3 losses and our competitive position. We cannot afford to look like we're harboring potential security threats out of misguided compassion. The pressure was relentless, designed to make Chad feel that his own position depended on taking decisive action against Maria. Chad found himself caught between his instincts and the political realities of corporate leadership. The board was indeed pressuring him for swift action on multiple fronts, and Marcus had positioned the Maria situation as a test of Chad's decisiveness and competence. Every day we delay sends a message to potential adversaries that TechGlobal is vulnerable, Marcus warned. Every day we allow this situation to continue undermines confidence in our security protocols and our leadership's commitment to protecting shareholder interests. As TechGlobal's AI systems continued to malfunction, causing mounting financial losses that now exceeded $400 million, Marcus saw an opportunity to eliminate Maria permanently. The company's technical problems were getting worse, not better, and Marcus knew that eventually someone would realize that the mysterious corrections had actually improved system performance. He needed to act before his narrative unraveled completely. During an emergency board meeting streamed to major investors, with financial journalists watching for signs of corporate crisis, Marcus announced that the ongoing technical failures were connected to the earlier security breach. The backdoors and logic bombs planted by our industrial espionage problem are now activating, Marcus declared with manufactured confidence. Every day we delay action is another day of potential catastrophic loss. The sabotage operation is entering its final phase. The pressure became overwhelming. Chad, facing a potential vote of no confidence from his board and mounting criticism from investors who were demanding explanations for the company's technical failures, was forced to make a choice between his CEO position and his growing suspicions about Marcus's motives. The board has made their decision, Chad announced reluctantly. We cannot continue to employ someone who represents a potential security risk, regardless of the circumstances. I'm sorry, Maria, he said during the brief termination meeting, his voice heavy with regret. I know this seems unfair, but my hands are tied. The board insists that we take decisive action, and the legal department is concerned about liability if we don't address the security allegations. Maria cleared out her small locker in silence, knowing that arguing would only make things worse. She had learned long ago that the truth was less important than appearances, that facts mattered less than narratives when powerful people needed scapegoats. Sophia cried when she learned her mother had been labeled a corporate spy by her classmates' parents who had heard the rumors spreading through the community. Why are people saying bad things about you, Mommy? She asked through her tears. Why don't they believe you're a good person? Maria held her daughter close, struggling to explain a world where intelligence was suspect when it appeared in unexpected places, where competence could be transformed into criminality by those who needed someone to blame. Maria's world contracted to their tiny apartment, and the growing fear that she would never find work again. The allegations would follow her everywhere, making employers suspicious of hiring someone who had been terminated for security violations. But in her worn cardboard box of possessions, she still kept the USB drive containing her MIT credentials and her husband's final research notes. Some nights, when the compulsion to fix mathematical errors became unbearable, she would study Roberto's work and remember what it felt like to believe that numbers could make the world better instead of destroying everything you loved. 23 hours into TechGlobal's final crisis, with bankruptcy lawyers waiting in the lobby and news crews gathering outside, Marcus Sterling decided to make one last gambit. The company's AI systems had failed completely, costing over $500 million and threatening the jobs of thousands of employees. Marcus knew that his own position was precarious. If anyone discovered that he lacked the technical knowledge to solve the crisis, his career would be over. He arranged for Maria to be brought back to the building, not as an employee, but as a defendant in what he planned to present as the climactic exposure of corporate espionage. The main conference room was packed with board members, senior executives, legal counsel, and financial analysts. Marcus had choreographed the moment carefully, positioning himself as the corporate hero who had identified and neutralized a sophisticated threat. Television cameras were rolling, broadcasting the emergency meeting to investors and the general public. "Ladies and gentlemen, members of the media," Marcus announced as security escorted Maria into the room. "I present the architect of our current crisis." Maria stood quietly in her worn jacket, surrounded by men in $1,000 suits who looked at her with mixture of curiosity and contempt. She had expected this moment in some way. The pattern of her life had always led to scenes like this. Brilliant minds in powerful positions deciding her fate based on assumptions about what someone like her could or couldn't understand. This woman has spent 3 years systematically sabotaging our systems, creating dependency, and preparing for this exact moment of corporate destruction. Marcus continued, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. The back doors she planted are now executing their final protocol. Marcus continued, building to his crescendo. The room was silent except for the clicking of camera shutters and the quiet hum of recording equipment. She created this crisis deliberately, positioning herself as indispensable while gathering intelligence on our most sensitive technologies. Today, she expected to watch us burn while offering to sell us the solutions to problems she created. The narrative was compelling, theatrical, and completely fabricated, but it gave the audience someone to blame for the company's failures. But CEO Chad Wellington had spent the past month conducting his own quiet investigation into Maria's background. What he had discovered made Marcus's narrative impossible to believe. The deeper he dug, the more convinced he became that they had been systematically destroying the career of someone who could have saved the company months ago. The evidence was overwhelming. This woman wasn't a saboteur. She was a genius who had been forced into hiding by prejudice and circumstances beyond her control. "Enough!" Chad's voice cut through Marcus's presentation like a blade. The room fell completely silent as the CEO stood up, his expression grim but resolved. The television cameras swiveled to focus on him, capturing what would become one of the most watched corporate moments of the year. "Marcus, I've heard enough conspiracy theories to last a lifetime. What I haven't heard is any actual evidence to support your claims." Chad walked around the conference table to stand directly in front of Maria, his body language conveying respect rather than suspicion. "Dr. Maria Isabel Gonzalez Rivera, I want to apologize publicly for what this company has put you through. After conducting a thorough investigation into your background, I understand the grave injustice that has been done." The room erupted in confused murmurs, board members whispering urgently among themselves as Marcus's carefully constructed narrative began to collapse in real time. "I don't understand what you're talking about," Marcus said, his voice slightly higher than usual as panic began to set in. "She's a janitor. She doesn't have any technical qualifications. The security footage clearly shows someone correcting mathematical errors that our own engineering team couldn't solve. Chad interrupted. Dr. Gonzalez Rivera holds a doctorate in applied mathematics from MIT, specializing in AI optimization algorithms. She is the author of 15 patents in machine learning efficiency, and before she was blacklisted for seeking justice after her husband's death, she was considered one of the most promising minds in computational mathematics. The silence that followed was deafening. Camera operators zoomed in on Maria's face, capturing her stunned expression as someone finally acknowledged her true identity in public. Board members stared in shock, realizing they had been complicit in persecuting exactly the kind of talent their company desperately needed. Marcus sat frozen, his worldview crumbling as he processed the implications of what Chad was revealing. Furthermore, Chad continued, his voice growing stronger as he gained momentum, our analysis shows that over the past 3 years, Dr. Gonzalez Rivera has quietly corrected 23 critical errors in our algorithmic systems. Each correction has saved this company between $50 and $200 million in potential losses. The total value of her contributions exceeds $2 billion. The numbers hung in the air like an indictment, making Marcus's claims of sabotage seem not just wrong, but absurd. Marcus scrambled for a response, his carefully prepared talking points useless in the face of these revelations. That's impossible. She was sabotaging our systems, not improving them. The evidence clearly shows deliberate tampering with sensitive data. But even as he spoke, Marcus could see doubt creeping into the faces around the table. The confident narrative he had constructed was unraveling, and with it, his own credibility. Maria finally spoke, her voice quiet but clear, carrying the authority of someone who finally had permission to use her intelligence in public. Mr. Sterling, would you mind explaining to everyone present why you chose a regression algorithm over a neural network approach for the Q3 implementation? The question was delivered without malice, but it cut straight to the heart of Marcus's incompetence. The room watched as he struggled to formulate a response to what any competent systems analyst would consider a basic question. Marcus blinked, clearly unprepared for a technical discussion he couldn't control or deflect. It's more efficient for our use case. The regression model provides better computational performance for our specific parameters. The words sounded impressive to non-technical ears, but Maria and the few engineers in the room recognized them as meaningless jargon designed to obscure rather than illuminate. Could you elaborate on what you mean by efficient? Specifically, why would you accept a 23.7% error rate when a properly tuned neural network could achieve less than 5% accuracy loss? Maria's follow-up question exposed the fundamental flaw in the company's approach, revealing that Marcus had chosen inferior technology either through ignorance or poor judgment. And could you explain why you didn't account for recursive overflow errors in the implementation? The room watched as Marcus struggled to formulate a response, sweat beginning to form on his forehead as he realized he was being exposed as fundamentally unqualified for his position. These are highly technical concepts, he said defensively, his voice becoming shrill. I don't need to justify my strategic decisions to someone who... He caught himself before completing the sentence, but everyone in the room understood what he had been about to say. To someone who what, Mr. Sterling? Maria's voice carried a quiet strength that filled the room, the confidence of someone who had finally been given permission to use her full capabilities. To someone whose husband died because you decided that fixing a known algorithmic flaw would be too expensive. To someone who has spent 3 years cleaning your offices while silently preventing the kind of catastrophic failures that killed Roberto. The personal revelation hit the room like a physical blow, connecting Maria's technical expertise to a tragedy that gave her mission emotional weight. The room was completely silent now, the weight of Maria's words settling over everyone present. Marcus sat down heavily, his face ashen as he realized that his victim possessed not only the technical knowledge to expose his incompetence, but also a personal history that gave her moral authority he could never challenge. "I didn't know," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I didn't know about your husband. There were so many projects, so many cost analyses." Maria stepped forward, not in anger but with something approaching compassion. The cameras captured every nuance of her expression as she chose forgiveness over revenge, understanding over retribution. "Mr. Sterling, I understand pressure. I understand being afraid of failure, of disappointing people who expect perfection. My father taught me that fear very early, and it nearly destroyed my ability to think clearly." Her words carried the wisdom of someone who had survived both technical challenges and personal trauma. She moved to the whiteboard where Marcus's latest failed calculations were still visible, the mathematical errors glaring under the harsh fluorescent lights. "But when we let fear drive our decisions, when we choose pride over truth, people get hurt. Companies fail. And sometimes people die." With swift, practiced movements, Maria began correcting the errors on the board, her marker flowing across the surface with the fluid grace of someone completely comfortable with complex mathematics. The complex calculations flowed from her marker like music, each step building toward an elegant solution that no one else in the room could have conceived. "Your current algorithm fails because it's trying to solve a 3-dimensional optimization problem using 2-dimensional logic," she explained as she wrote, her teaching instincts taking over. "The recursive overflow errors compound exponentially, which is why your system crashes get progressively worse over time." Within 5 minutes, she had rewritten the entire algorithmic framework. The solution was not just correct, it was beautiful in the way that only truly elegant mathematics could be. The cameras captured every stroke of her marker, broadcasting her expertise to millions of viewers who were witnessing a master at work. "Run this version," she said simply, turning back to face the room. "Your error rate will drop to less than 2%, and the system will be stable indefinitely." David Chen, who had been watching from the back of the room with tears in his eyes, immediately began entering the new algorithm into his laptop. His fingers flew across the keyboard as he implemented Maria's corrections, the familiar code structures falling into place with satisfying precision. The results appeared within minutes, and his expression shifted from skepticism to amazement to something approaching awe. "It works," he announced to the room, his voice carrying the excitement of someone witnessing a genuine breakthrough. "Error rate is down to 1.8%. System stability is perfect across all test parameters. We're looking at savings of approximately $450 million. The financial impact was staggering, transforming the company's crisis into a triumph through the application of Maria's expertise. Marcus Sterling sat in his chair like a man who had just watched his entire world view collapse. Everything he had believed about intelligence, about worth, about who deserved respect in corporate America had been revealed as ignorant prejudice. The woman he had dismissed as intellectually inferior had just accomplished in 5 minutes what he and his entire team had failed to achieve in months of effort. "I'm sorry," he said finally, his voice barely audible above the whispered conversations filling the room. "I was so afraid of being found incompetent that I convinced myself the problem had to be someone else's fault. I turned you into the enemy because I couldn't admit I didn't know how to fix things. The admission was painful but necessary, the first step toward understanding how his fear and prejudice had nearly destroyed both Maria's life and the company's future." Maria looked at him with an expression that held no triumph, only understanding. The cameras captured this moment of grace, this choice to respond to cruelty with compassion rather than revenge. "Mr. Sterling, intelligence doesn't care about the color of our skin or the universities on our diplomas. Mathematics doesn't respect corporate hierarchies. And fear makes us all do terrible things sometimes." Her words offered redemption to someone who had caused her immense suffering, demonstrating a nobility that elevated the entire proceedings. Chad Wellington stepped forward, his voice carrying the authority of someone ready to make amends for institutional failures. "Dr. Gonzalez Rivera, I would like to offer you the position of Chief Technology Officer, with a salary of $3 million annually and full public acknowledgement of your contributions to this company. We also want to establish a research lab in your name, with funding to pursue whatever mathematical challenges interest you most." Maria was quiet for a long moment, considering not just the offer, but the weight of everything that had brought her to this moment. The cameras waited, the room held its breath, and millions of viewers watched as she processed the choice between personal vindication and something larger. "Mr. Wellington, I appreciate the offer, but I have a different request. Instead of hiring me, I'd like TechGlobal to establish a $15 million fund for mathematics education in underserved communities." The request surprised everyone in the room, transforming what could have been a moment of personal triumph into something more significant. "There are too many brilliant minds cleaning offices and stocking shelves because the world can't see past their circumstances," Maria continued. "Too many children who learn to hide their intelligence because they're told it doesn't belong to people like them." Her words carried the weight of personal experience, the pain of watching potential waste away under the burden of prejudice and poverty. "I'll also need that building you were planning to demolish in East San Jose," she continued with a slight smile that humanized the moment. "I'm going to turn it into an academy where kids like my daughter can discover that numbers are friends, not enemies. Where they can learn that intelligence comes in every color and speaks every language, and that the most important breakthroughs often come from the people no one expects." 6 months later, the Hidden Figures Academy opened its doors to its first class of 50 students from across the socioeconomic spectrum. Maria stood before a classroom filled with children whose eyes held the same mixture of fear and fascination with mathematics that she remembered from her own childhood. The walls were covered with inspirational quotes in multiple languages, complex equations rendered as artistic displays, and photographs of mathematicians and scientists from every background imaginable. On the whiteboard behind her, she had written a simple equation: success, talent, courage, opportunity. The formula had become the Academy's unofficial motto, a reminder that achievement required not just individual gifts, but also the bravery to use them and the circumstances that allowed them to flourish. "Who can tell me what this equation means?" she asked the class, her voice carrying the warmth of someone who genuinely loved teaching. A small girl in the front row raised her hand tentatively, her expression mixing curiosity with the uncertainty that many of the students brought from schools where their questions weren't always welcome. "Ms. Maria, does it mean we can all be smart if we try hard enough?" The question revealed both hope and doubt, the internal struggle between potential and the messages these children had received about their limitations. Maria smiled, remembering her own daughter's questions about why some people got to be engineers while others cleaned their offices. "It means that talent exists everywhere, in every community, in every family. It doesn't care about your address or your parents' jobs or the language you speak at home." She gestured around the classroom with its new computers and advanced mathematics textbooks. "Courage is what we choose to do when things get difficult, when people tell us we don't belong, when we face problems that seem impossible, and opportunity." She gestured around the classroom with its state-of-the-art equipment and carefully designed learning spaces. Opportunity is what we create for each other. It's what happens when someone believes in your potential before you even believe in it yourself. The students absorbed her words with the intensity of children who had rarely heard adults speak to them about their possibilities rather than their limitations. David Chen, who had left TechGlobal to help run the academy, poked his head into the classroom. His transition from corporate engineer to educator had been seamless, driven by the same passion for problem-solving that had made him successful in the tech world. "Dr. Rivera, the kids in the advanced programming class want to show you their latest project. They've designed an algorithm to optimize food distribution for homeless shelters." As Maria walked towards the computer lab, she passed a framed photograph hanging in the hallway. It showed Roberto in their old MIT laboratory, smiling as he worked on the equations that he had hoped would make transportation safer for everyone. Below the photo, an inscription read, "For Roberto Martinez and all the brilliant minds whose voices were silenced too soon. Their dreams live on in every problem we solve and every student we inspire." The academy had become more than Maria had dreamed possible. Students who had been written off by traditional educational systems were thriving, discovering that their minds were capable of extraordinary things when given proper support and encouragement. College recruiters had begun visiting regularly, and several major technology companies had established scholarship programs specifically for Hidden Figures graduates. But perhaps more importantly, the academy had become a model replicated in dozens of cities across the country. Sophia, now 13 and an advanced student at the academy, often helped teach younger children during her free time. She had inherited her mother's gift for seeing patterns and her father's gentle patience with struggling students. When other kids asked about her family, she spoke with pride about her mother's journey from janitor to founder, about the importance of recognizing brilliance wherever it appears. My mom always says that the most important discoveries often come from the people no one expects," Sophia would tell the younger students, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who had grown up understanding her own worth. "That's why we have to listen to everyone, and why we have to be brave enough to share our ideas even when other people don't believe in us yet." Her words carried forward the lessons Maria had learned through decades of struggle and triumph. Marcus Sterling had quietly resigned from TechGlobal and entered therapy to address the insecurities and prejudices that had driven his behavior. He occasionally volunteered at the academy, helping with business planning and administrative tasks. The work was humbling, but he found genuine satisfaction in supporting an institution that challenged everything he had once believed about worth and potential. His transformation was slow and sometimes painful, but it was real. Chad Wellington had become one of the Academy's biggest advocates, frequently speaking at corporate conferences about the business imperative of recognizing talent, regardless of its packaging. TechGlobal had transformed into a model of inclusive hiring practices, and their innovations had accelerated dramatically once they began recruiting from unconventional backgrounds. The company's stock price had reached record highs, proving that doing the right thing could also be the profitable thing. On quiet evenings, Maria would sometimes stand in her small office at the academy and look out at the city lights, remembering the nights when she had cleaned those same buildings while wrestling with mathematical problems that no one knew she was solving. The compulsion to fix errors was still there, but it had transformed from a source of anguish into a tool for building something better. She no longer feared the numbers. They had become her allies in creating opportunity for others. The equation on her classroom whiteboard had evolved over the months, growing more complex as students added their own insights and discoveries. But the core message remained constant. Talent exists everywhere. Courage can be cultivated, and opportunity must be created intentionally. The Academy was proof that when these three elements combined, the results could change not just individual lives, but entire communities. Maria understood now that her story was not unique. In every office building she had cleaned, in every service job she had worked, there had likely been others carrying hidden brilliance while the world saw only their circumstances. The Academy was just the beginning of a larger revolution in how society recognized and nurtured human potential, one student at a time, one breakthrough at a time, one life transformed at a time. As she locked the Academy doors each evening and headed home to Sofia, Maria carried with her the satisfaction of knowing that tomorrow would bring new minds discovering their capabilities, new problems being solved by unexpected voices, and new proof that the most powerful force in the world was not wealth or credentials, but the determination to see clearly and act courageously in service of truth. The numbers still called to her, but now they sang of possibility rather than fear, of solutions rather than failures, of a future where brilliance would be recognized wherever it chose to shine. And in that future, no child would have to choose between hiding their intelligence and facing the world's prejudices, because the world itself would finally understand that genius comes in every color, speaks every language, and deserves every opportunity to flourish.